The morning sun of Station Primus cast long shadows across the briefing room. 42 cadets sat in silence as Commander Velok walked to the front. His gray skin and 6 eyes made him look terrifying, but today his voice was almost gentle. It was the voice of someone delivering bad news. "The survival examination begins tomorrow," he said. "You will be divided into teams of 8. Your mission is simple. Cross 3 kilometers of jungle on Nexera 7. Reach the extraction point before sunset. Simple." Jake Mitchell almost laughed at that word. He had read the reports. He knew the truth. Jake was 23 years old, born in the mountains of Montana on Earth. He had grown up hunting deer with his grandfather, fishing in cold streams, and learning to read the forest like a book. When he joined the Galactic Military Academy, everyone told him he was crazy. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for 90 years. They were considered weak, slow, and primitive compared to other species. But Jake had his reasons for being here. He wanted to prove something. Not to the aliens. To himself. Commander Velok continued his briefing. 20 elite instructors will hunt you through the jungle. They will use non-lethal weapons. If you are hit, you are eliminated. Your weapons are also non-lethal. You may fight back, but I do not recommend it. A Kelleran cadet raised one of his 4 massive arms. His name was Vrix, and he stood almost 8 feet tall. His body was covered in natural armor that could stop a knife. He was the squad leader for Jake's team. "Commander, what is the success rate for this exercise?" Vrix asked. Velok's 6 eyes blinked slowly. In 47 years, no team has ever completed the exercise. The room went silent. Jake watched the faces of his fellow cadets. Fear, confusion, anger. Some of them looked ready to quit right now. "The jungle of Nexera 7 is designed to test you beyond your limits," Velok explained. "Sensor dampeners will block most of your technology. The instructors know every path, every hiding spot, every trick. The terrain itself will work against you. This exercise is not about winning. It is about learning to fail with honor." Jake did not like that answer. He had never been good at failing. After the briefing, Jake found his squad gathered in the preparation room. Besides Vrix, there were 6 others. Tessa Blake was a human like Jake, a communications specialist with red hair and sharp eyes. She had been in the academy for 3 years and had never spoken to Jake before. Nor was a Silvani, a species known for their speed and their glowing skin. The others were a mix of different aliens, all of them looking nervous. Vrix stood at the center, his deep voice filling the room. "We will use standard formation. Move fast through the main trails. Stay together. Fight if we must." Jake studied the holographic map floating above the table. The jungle was dense, filled with massive trees and thick undergrowth. 3 paths cut through it, wide enough for large species like Vrix. Everything else was tangled wilderness. "The trails are obvious," Jake said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Vrix narrowed his 4 eyes. "What did you say, human?" "The trails. They are obvious. The instructors will expect us to use them." Vrix made a sound that might have been a laugh. "And what do you suggest? We fly over the jungle? We dig under it?" He shook his head. "The trails are the only paths wide enough for proper movement. We are not small creatures, human. Some of us cannot crawl through bushes like animals." Jake did not argue. He had learned that arguing with Kellerans was pointless. They were proud warriors who believed strength was everything. To them, humans were soft and weak, barely worth noticing. But Jake noticed things. He noticed that the map showed the jungle floor was covered in fallen branches and dead wood. He noticed that certain plants were marked as having sticky pollen. He noticed that the extraction point was surrounded by open ground with no cover. None of these things seemed important to anyone else. But to Jake, they were pieces of a puzzle. That night, Jake could not sleep. He lay on his bed in the barracks, staring at the ceiling. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. "The deer's faster than you," his grandfather had said many years ago. "It can hear better than you. It can smell you from a mile away. So why do humans win?" Young Jake had thought about it. "Because we have guns?" His grandfather had smiled. "Before guns, we had bows. Before bows, we had spears. Before spears, we had rocks and sticks. And still, we won. Do you know why?" Jake had shaken his head. "Because we think differently. Every other predator chases its prey. Humans, we change the world around us. We build traps. We create paths that lead where we want. We are patient. We plan. A wolf is dangerous for one moment. A human is dangerous forever." Jake had never forgotten those words. Now, lying in an alien barracks millions of miles from Earth, they felt more important than ever. The next morning came too fast. The squad gathered at the drop point, checking their equipment one last time. Non-lethal rifles, basic supplies, communication devices that would probably fail in the jungle. Nothing special. Tessa walked over to Jake. "You look calm," she said. "Do I? Everyone else looks like they are going to their own funeral. You look like you are going for a walk." Jake shrugged. "Maybe I am." Tessa studied him for a moment. "I heard what you said about the trails. You think there is another way?" "I think there is always another way. Most people just do not see it." Before Tessa could respond, the signal came. The exercise had begun. The squad moved into the jungle, following Vrix down the widest trail. The trees rose around them like giants, blocking out most of the sunlight. Strange sounds filled the air. Alien birds, insects, things that had no name in any human language. Jake walked at the back of the group, his eyes moving constantly. He studied every shadow, every branch, every leaf. He was not looking for enemies. He was looking for possibilities. Somewhere in this jungle, 20 hunters were waiting for them. They had better weapons, better training, better knowledge of the terrain. By every measure, the squad was already dead. But Jake Mitchell was a human, and humans had been winning impossible fights since they first picked up a rock and decided to hunt something bigger than themselves. The exercise was unwinnable. Jake intended to win anyway. The first ambush came without warning. The squad had been walking for 20 minutes when the jungle exploded with light. Blue stun bolts cut through the air like angry fireflies. 2 cadets at the front of the line went down instantly, their bodies jerking as the non-lethal rounds hit them. "Cover!" Rix roared, diving behind a massive tree root. Jake was already moving. He grabbed Tessa and pulled her down into a shallow ditch, feeling a stun bolt pass inches above his head. The air smelled like burned ozone. The shooting stopped as quickly as it had started. When Jake lifted his head, he saw the 2 fallen cadets being carried away by instructors in black uniforms. Their faces showed no emotion. This was routine for them. They knew exactly where we would be, Nora whispered, her glowing skin flickering with stress. They were waiting for us. Rix stood up, brushing dirt from his armor. "We move faster. We give them less time to prepare." It was the wrong decision, but Jake said nothing. He had already tried to warn them about the trails. No one had listened. Perhaps they needed to learn the hard way. The squad continued forward, now moving at a near run. Rix pushed them hard, his forearm swinging as he crashed through the undergrowth like a living tank. Jake struggled to keep up. His human body was not built for this kind of speed. They made it another kilometer before the second ambush. This time, the instructors attacked from above. They had hidden in the trees, their bodies camouflaged against the bark. 4 cadets were hit before anyone could react. Rix managed to return fire, but the instructors vanished into the canopy like ghosts. Now there were only 4 of them left. Rix, Tessa, Nor, and Jake. The Kellon squad leader stood in the middle of the trail, his chest heaving with exhaustion and anger. His pride was wounded. His squad was destroyed. For a warrior race like his, this was the worst kind of shame. "We cannot continue," Rick said finally. "Protocol says we should surrender. Accept the failure." Nor lowered her head. "Maybe that is best. We cannot fight what we cannot see." Tessa looked at Jake. "You have been quiet. Do you agree?" Jake was not looking at them. He was crouching on the ground, examining a broken branch. It was about 2 feet long, thick at one end and thin at the other. He turned it over in his hands, feeling its weight. "No," he said. Rix made an angry sound. "No? You have a better plan, human? Please, share your wisdom with us." Jake stood up. For the first time since the exercise began, there was fire in his eyes. "The instructors are not smarter than us. They are not faster or stronger. They just know how we think. They know we will use the trails. They know we will run. They know we will hide. So what do you suggest?" Nor asked. Jake snapped the branch in half. The sound was sharp and loud in the quiet jungle. "We stop thinking like prey. We start thinking like predators." Rix laughed. It was not a kind laugh. "You? A predator? Humans are the weakest species in the academy. You have no claws, no armor, no venom. What could you possibly know about being a predator?" Jake met his gaze without flinching. "My species hunted animals 10 times our size before we had fire. We chased them for days until their hearts gave out. We built traps that caught them while we slept. We changed the world around us to make hunting easier. Every other predator adapts to its environment. Humans adapt the environment to themselves." The jungle was silent. Even the alien birds had stopped singing. Tessa stepped forward. "What do you need?" Jake looked around at the jungle. For the first time, he did not see obstacles. He saw resources. "Time," he said. 2 hours. "And information." "More. You studied the ecosystem of this planet. Tell me about the plants, the trees, the animals, everything." Nor's glowing skin brightened with curiosity. "Why?" "Because I am going to turn this jungle into a weapon." For the next 2 hours, Jake worked without rest. He sent Nor ahead to scout the terrain while Tessa intercepted instructor communications with her equipment. Rix, still skeptical, was given the task of moving heavy objects and bending thick branches. Jake talked while he worked, explaining his thinking in simple terms. "The instructors expect us to run toward the extraction point. They will set up ambushes along the obvious paths. But they are not expecting us to change the jungle itself." He showed them how to tie vines together to create tripwires. He demonstrated how certain plants, when disturbed, release clouds of yellow pollen that stuck to everything. He pointed out hollow logs that made loud sounds when stepped on. "Noise is a weapon," Jake said. "Confusion is a weapon. Fear is a weapon." Rix watched with growing amazement. "Where did you learn this?" "My grandfather. He taught me to hunt deer in the mountains of Montana. The deer were faster than me. They could hear and smell better. But I learned to read the forest. I learned to predict where they would go. I learned to make them go where I wanted them. And now you will hunt the instructors?" Jake smiled. It was not a warm smile. "No, I will make them hunt themselves." The plan was simple but required perfect timing. They would not run toward the extraction point. They would move parallel to it, staying in the dense undergrowth. Along the way, they would leave traps. Not deadly traps. The instructors had armor and medical supplies. The traps that would slow them, confuse them, and make them afraid. The goal is not to beat them in a fight, Jake explained. We would lose that fight. The goal is to make them stop thinking clearly. Scared animals make mistakes. Scared hunters make worse mistakes. Tessa shook her head slowly. This is insane. Yes, Jake agreed. That is why it will work. Because no one expects insanity. As the afternoon sun began to fade, the 4 remaining cadets split up. Each had a specific job. Noor would create false trails using her knowledge of local animals. Tessa would monitor instructor movements and warn the others. Rix would set up the larger traps that required his strength. And Jake would coordinate everything, moving through the jungle like a ghost. Before they separated, Rix put one of his massive hands on Jake's shoulder. The Kelleran's eyes were different now. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something that looked almost like respect. I was wrong about you, Rix said. You are not weak. You are something I have never seen before. Jake nodded. We are all something the galaxy has never seen before. They just forgot to be afraid of us. The hunt was about to begin. The jungle of Nexera 7 had stood for 10,000 years. Ancient trees rose toward the sky like pillars holding up the heavens. Thick vines hung between them like ropes in a giant's playground. The ground was covered with fallen leaves, dead branches, and strange plants that glowed faintly in the shadows. For 10,000 years, this jungle had been unchanged in 2 hours. Jake Mitchell changed it forever. He moved through the undergrowth with a purpose that surprised even himself. His hands worked constantly, tying knots, bending branches, arranging fallen wood into patterns that seemed random but were carefully planned. Noor watched him with growing amazement. Her bioluminescent skin glowed brighter when she was confused, and right now she looked like a small star. I do not understand, she said. You are just moving sticks. How will this stop trained soldiers? Jake paused, wiping sweat from his forehead. The humidity was brutal, but he barely noticed. His mind was too focused. When you walk through a forest, he said, what do you see? Noor looked around. Trees, plants, the ground. Exactly. You see what is there. You do not see what is possible. Jake picked up a thin vine from the ground. This vine is just a plant. But stretched between 2 trees at ankle height, it becomes a tripwire. And when someone trips, they make noise. And when they make noise, everyone knows where they are. He demonstrated, pulling the vine tight and securing it to 2 tree trunks. It was nearly invisible in the dim light. 1 tripwire is annoying, Jake continued. But what if there are 50? What if every path leads to more of them? What if every step might be a trap? Noor's skin flickered. They would become afraid to move. Yes, and fear is the greatest weapon of all. Across the jungle, Tessa was doing her part. Her communication equipment could not send messages in the sensor-dampened zone, but it could still receive. She had found a frequency the instructors were using to coordinate their movements. They think we're still running toward the extraction point, she reported through their short-range communicators. They are setting up a kill zone about 1 kilometer ahead. Jake smiled. Good. Let them prepare for an enemy that will never come. Where are they now? Spread out in a wide arc. They are being careful. Our early losses made them confident. Confidence is another word for blindness. Keep listening. Rix was having the time of his life. The Kelleran warrior had spent years training for honorable combat. He had learned to fight with weapons and fists, to stand tall against enemies in open battle. What Jake was teaching him was different. It was sneaky. It was clever. It was absolutely wonderful. Like this? Rix asked, bending a thick branch until it was curved like a bow. Jake checked the trap. A pile of smaller branches was balanced on top of the bent branch, held in place by a thin vine tied to a trigger stick. When someone touched the trigger, the branches would fall with a loud crash. Perfect, Jake said. Now we need 4 more of these along that ridge. Rix nodded eagerly. The instructors will think an army is moving through the trees. That is the idea. They have sensors that detect heat and movement, but they trust their eyes and ears more. We fill their ears with noise and their eyes with chaos. The afternoon sun moved across the sky. Jake worked without rest, his mind racing with possibilities. Every fallen log became a potential hiding spot. Every patch of sticky pollen plants became a sensor trap. Every game trail became a funnel that led exactly where he wanted. He thought about his grandfather constantly. The old man had died 3 years ago, before Jake joined the academy. But his lessons lived on. A hunter does not chase his prey, his grandfather had said. A hunter makes the prey come to him. You create a maze with only one exit, and you wait at that exit. That was exactly what Jake was doing. The instructors thought they were hunting 4 helpless cadets. They did not realize that those cadets were building a maze around them. Tessa found Jake as he was finishing a particularly complex trap. It involved a hollow log, some carefully balanced rocks, and a type of plant that screamed when disturbed. Yes, screamed. Nexera 7 had some very strange plants. I need to ask you something, Tessa said. Jake did not stop working. Ask? Why are you doing this? You could have surrendered with the others. Accepted the failure. Why fight so hard for something everyone says is impossible? Jake was quiet for a long moment. His hands paused on the screaming plant. When humans joined the galactic community, he said finally, everyone told us we were nothing special. Weak bodies. Short lives. No natural weapons. We were accepted because we were not a threat. Do you understand what that means? Tessa nodded slowly. They look down on us. They pity us. And pity is worse than hatred. At least hatred respects your power. Jake stood up, his eyes hard. I joined the academy to show them what we really are. Not what our bodies can do. What our minds can do. Humans did not survive because we were strong. We survived because we were clever. Because we never gave up. Because we looked at impossible situations and said, there must be a way. He gestured at the jungle around them. This exercise is unwinnable. 20 elite soldiers against 4 cadets. Everyone accepts that. Everyone surrenders. But I am human. My ancestors crossed oceans in wooden boats. They survived ice ages. They hunted mammoths with pointed sticks. Impossible is just a word to us. Tessa felt something stir in her chest. Pride. A feeling she had not experienced since joining the academy. What do you need me to do? She asked. Jake smiled. Keep listening to their communications. When they start getting confused, I need to know. By evening, the trap maze was complete. It covered nearly 2 square kilometers of jungle, a web of tripwires, noise traps, false trails, and confusion points. The instructors were still waiting in their kill zone, wondering why the cadets had not arrived. They would learn soon enough. Jake gathered his squad for final instructions. Rix looked eager. Nor looked nervous but determined. Tessa looked like she had just discovered something important about herself. From now on, we do not exist, Jake said. We are shadows. We are silence. We move only through the paths I marked. We speak only through hand signals. And most importantly, we do not fight. Rix frowned. We do not fight? The traps will fight for us. Our job is to stay alive and reach the extraction point. Let the jungle do our killing." As darkness fell over Nexus 7, Jake Mitchell looked at his work with satisfaction. 20 hunters were out there, thinking they controlled the jungle. They were wrong. The jungle belonged to the human now. Instructor Velok had been running these exercises for 15 years. He had seen every trick, every strategy, every desperate attempt. He had watched the best soldiers in the galaxy fail in this jungle. Nothing surprised him anymore until tonight. The first sign that something was wrong came at 16:23 hours. Instructor Morath, a veteran of 30 combat missions, stepped on what looked like solid ground. It was not solid. It was a thin layer of leaves covering a shallow pit filled with sticky pollen. Morath fell with a cry of surprise. The pollen covered his armor, his sensors, his face. It was not dangerous, but it clung to everything. His thermal sensors went crazy, detecting heat signatures everywhere as the pollen spread across the jungle floor. "Morath is down," someone shouted over the communication channel. "Some kind of trap." 3 instructors rushed to help him. They moved quickly through the undergrowth, focused on reaching their fallen comrade. None of them saw the trip wires. The first instructor hit a vine stretched between 2 trees. He stumbled forward, crashing into a carefully balanced pile of branches. The noise was tremendous. Startled birds exploded from the trees, filling the air with screaming calls. The second instructor tried to catch the first. His foot landed on a hollow log that made a sound like thunder. He jumped backward in surprise, directly into a bush covered with those screaming plants. The plants did what they did best. They screamed. The third instructor, completely disoriented by the noise, accidentally fired his weapon. The stun bolt hit Morath, who was still covered in pollen and struggling to stand. The veteran soldier went down, officially eliminated from the exercise in 30 seconds, without firing a single shot. 1 instructor had been eliminated, and 3 others were confused and scared, hiding in the dense undergrowth 50 meters away. Jake Mitchell watched with cold satisfaction. The trap had worked exactly as planned. 3 more moving toward the noise, Tessa whispered through the communicator. "They are coming from the east." Jake made a hand signal to Noor. The Sylvani scout nodded and disappeared into the darkness. Her glowing skin dimmed to almost nothing. She knew what to do. The 3 Eastern instructors were careful. They had heard the chaos and were moving slowly, weapons ready. They followed what looked like a fresh trail through the jungle. It was fresh. Noor had made it 20 minutes ago, using her knowledge of local animals to create perfect fake footprints. The trail led exactly where Jake wanted. The instructors entered a small clearing. They stopped, sensing something was wrong. The clearing was too quiet. Too empty. Then Rick struck. The Kelleran had been hiding under a pile of branches for an hour, barely breathing. When the instructors stopped in the clearing, he surged upward like a monster from a nightmare. His 4 arms grabbed the nearest instructor and threw him into the second. Both went down in a tangle of limbs. The third instructor spun around, raising his weapon. But Jake was already there, emerging from behind a tree. He grabbed the instructor's arm and twisted. The weapon fired into the canopy, harmless. Jake's other hand found a pressure point on the instructor's neck, and the soldier collapsed. In 5 seconds, 3 instructors were down. Rick grinned, his teeth gleaming in the darkness. "That was fun," the Kelleran said. Jake grabbed his arm. "No time. Move." They vanished into the jungle before anyone could respond. Back at the instructor command post, panic was spreading. Reports came in one after another. Traps everywhere. False trails. Strange noises. It was impossible to tell what was real and what was deception. "Where are they?" the commander demanded. 4 cadets cannot do this much damage. "Sir, we have lost 6 instructors in the last hour. Our sensors are useless. That pollen is everywhere. The commander studied his tactical map. The cadets were supposed to be running toward the extraction point. Instead, they seem to be everywhere and nowhere. It is the human, someone said quietly. He is doing this. The commander turned. One human? Making fools of 20 elite soldiers? Not making fools, sir. Hunting us. That word hung in the air. Hunting. It felt wrong. Cadets did not hunt instructors. Prey did not hunt predators. But something had changed tonight, and no one understood what. Meanwhile, Jake and his squad moved through the jungle like ghosts. They followed the hidden paths Jake had marked, narrow trails that only small creatures could use. Rix had to crawl on his belly sometimes, but he did not complain. He was beginning to understand. Every few hundred meters, they would pause while Jake checked on his traps. Some had been triggered. Others were still waiting. He adjusted a few, set up new ones using materials he found, and kept moving. How do you know where they are? Noor asked. I do not, Jake admitted. But I know where they will go. When animals are scared, they become predictable. They run towards safety. They group together. They take the easiest paths. He pointed through the trees. Right now, the instructors are gathering near that ridge. It is the highest ground in the area. They think it will give them an advantage. Will it? Jake smiled. I put 7 traps on that ridge. Over the next 2 hours, the jungle became a nightmare for the instructors. Every path led to traps. Every shadow seemed to hide enemies. They started seeing threats everywhere, shooting at bushes and animals. One instructor eliminated another by accident when a falling branch made him jump dot by 1900 hours. 11 instructors had been eliminated. Some by traps, some by friendly fire, some by the 3 quick ambush Jake had planned. The remaining 9 were gathered in a tight defensive circle, too scared to move. Tessa intercepted their communications. They are calling for reinforcement protocols. They want to abort the exercise. Jake shook his head. They will not abort. Too much pride. But they are not hunters anymore. They are survivors. And survivors do not think about winning. They think about living. The squad was less than a kilometer from the extraction point now. The worst was behind them. But Jake knew the final stretch would be the hardest. Open ground. No cover. The remaining instructors would be desperate. He looked at his squad. Rix, the proud warrior who had learned humility. Noor, the nervous scout who had found courage. Tessa, the doubting human who had discovered pride. One more push, Jake said. 1 more kilometer. And we make history. Rix put his massive hand on Jake's shoulder. Whatever happens, I will tell my children about this day. The day a human taught me what hunting really means. Jake nodded. There was no time for emotions. The extraction point was waiting, and so were 9 very angry instructors. The extraction point was a flat clearing at the edge of the jungle. A simple metal post marked the finish line. Anyone who touched that post before sunset completed the exercise. In 47 years, no one had touched it. Jake studied the clearing from the tree line. It was exactly as bad as he expected. The 9 remaining instructors had formed a perfect defensive perimeter around the clearing. They had learned from their mistakes. No more spreading out. No more trusting the trails. They stood shoulder to shoulder, weapons raised, watching every shadow. We cannot get through that, Noor whispered. They will see us the moment we leave the trees. And they will not fall for more traps, Rix added. They are too scared to move from their positions. Jake said nothing. He was thinking. Tessa crept up beside him. We have about 40 minutes until sunset. After that, we fail. 40 minutes. 9 armed instructors. Open ground with no cover. The situation seemed impossible, but Jake had been facing impossible situations all day. "Tessa," he said slowly, "can you broadcast on their communication frequency?" "Broadcast?" "Yes, but they will know where I am immediately." "That is the point." Jake turned to the others. "I have a plan. It is dangerous. It might not work, but it is our only chance," he explained quickly. Rick's eyes went wide. Noor started to glow brighter with stress. But when Jake finished, they all nodded. "Insane," Rick said. "Completely insane. I love it." The first part of the plan started with noise. Tessa positioned herself at the edge of the clearing, hidden behind a thick tree. She activated her communicator and began broadcasting on the instructor frequency. "All units, this is command. We have detected movement to the north. All instructors proceed to investigate." It was a simple trick. The instructors were not stupid. They knew their real command would never broadcast on an open frequency. But for just a moment, just 1 second, they all looked north. That was when Noor ran. The Silvani Scout was the fastest species in the Academy. When she moved at full speed, she was nearly invisible, a blur of light and motion. She exploded from the tree line on the south side of the clearing, running directly toward the extraction point. The instructors reacted instantly. Stun bolts filled the air. But Noor was too fast. She dodged left, then right, then left again. The ground around her exploded with blue light as shot after shot missed. She was not trying to reach the post. She was trying to draw their fire. "Now!" Jake shouted. Rick's burst from the undergrowth like a living tank. His massive body crashed through 2 instructors before they could turn. His forearms grabbed weapons, threw bodies, created chaos. He was not fighting to win. He was fighting to distract. 3 instructors went down under his assault. 4 others turned to help, abandoning their positions. For just a moment, the defensive line had a gap. Jake ran. He was not as fast as Noor or as strong as Rick's. He was just a human, a farmer's son from Montana. But he had something they did not. He had the ability to see patterns where others saw chaos. He had seen the gap before it existed. He had known exactly when it would appear. And he had positioned himself perfectly to exploit it. A stun bolt passed so close to his ear that he felt the heat. Another hit the ground at his feet. He kept running. 20 meters to the post. 15, 10. An instructor appeared in front of him, weapon raised. Jake did not slow down. He dropped into a slide, passing under the shot, and kicked the instructor's legs out from under him. The soldier fell with a grunt of surprise. 5 meters. Jake reached out his hand. His fingers touched cold metal. The post. For a moment, everything stopped. The instructors lowered their weapons. Noor stopped running. Rick's stopped fighting. Even the jungle seemed to hold its breath. Jake Mitchell, human cadet, had done the impossible. The sun was still above the horizon. The exercise was complete. Time is 1847 hours. A mechanical voice announced from the post. Exercise complete. Cadets are victorious. No one moved. The instructors stared at Jake like he was some kind of monster. Perhaps to them, he was. Then Rick started laughing. It began as a low rumble and grew into a roar that echoed through the jungle. He picked Jake up with all 4 arms and held him over his head like a trophy. The human did it. Rick's shouted. The human beat the unbeatable. Noor was crying, her bioluminescent skin glowing like a rainbow. Tessa ran across the clearing and hugged Jake so hard he could not breathe. Even some of the instructors were smiling, shaking their heads in amazement. Commander Velok approached slowly. His 6 eyes studied Jake with something that might have been respect. In 47 years, he said, no one has completed this exercise. I designed it to be impossible. I wanted cadets to learn that some battles cannot be won. Jake met his gaze. There is no such thing as an unwinnable battle. There are only battles we have not figured out how to win yet. Velok was quiet for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. It was a human gesture, something he must have learned from Earth customs. You have taught me something today, Private Mitchell. I will not forget it. Jake shook his hand. I just used some sticks and vines, sir. Nothing special. No, Velok said. You used something far more dangerous. You used a human mind. The news spread through the academy like fire. Then through the fleet. Then through the entire galactic community. A human cadet had beaten the unbeatable exercise using nothing but primitive traps and clever thinking. Military theorists studied the recordings for months. They analyzed every trap, every movement, every decision. They wrote papers with titles like The Psychology of Human Warfare and Persistence Predation in Modern Combat. But they missed the point. It was not about the traps. It was not about the strategy, Dodd. It was about what humans really were. For 90 years, the galaxy had pitied humanity. They saw weak bodies and short lives. They saw a species that needed technology to survive. Now, they saw something different. They saw a species that had crawled out of caves and conquered a death world. A species that had hunted animals 10 times their size. A species that never ever gave up. Jake Mitchell became a legend. Not because he was strong or fast or powerful, but because he reminded the galaxy of something important. Never underestimate a human. Years later, when young cadets asked about the legendary trap maze exercise, Commander Vrix, now decorated with medals and honored throughout the fleet, would tell them the truth. I have fought many enemies in my life, he would say. Creatures with claws and fangs and poison. Warriors with technology beyond imagination. But the most dangerous thing I ever faced was a human with a broken branch and 2 hours to think. He would pause, and his 4 eyes would grow distant with memory. Never corner a human. Never assume they have given up. And never, ever forget what they really are. Their ancestors hunted mammoths with pointed sticks and patience. Technology changes. That instinct? That stays forever. Somewhere in the galaxy, on a small station orbiting a distant star, Jake Mitchell smiled. He was teaching now, training a new generation of soldiers from 100 different species. And every year, he made them run the jungle exercise. None of them beat it, but that was okay. They were not human. The end.